Oh, hi there. Welcome back. Hope everybody's doing well. Obviously, I'm Nathan, or the 710 Extractions, and I want to welcome you guys to another episode of the 710 Opinions podcast, your weekly dose of all things cannabis. Before we dive into the episode, I just want to remind everyone to please like and subscribe here on YouTube, and come check me out on Instagram and also on Patreon. Your support not only makes all this possible, but you guys help me, reach more people. That, of course, brings me more material, which is the creation of more content. I mean, it's a cyclical thing. Not to mention, a little love from you goes a long way in the algorithm. But seriously, guys, the real party here is happening over on Patreon.com. Patreon.com/the710 Extractions, and it is. Not only am I posting video and audio only posts, so for those of you that may want to listen while you're driving or whatever it is, but we are consistently publishing as fast as I can, as best I can, publishing new full-length, completely open source tutorial content, and of course any question or any patron has the ability to message me at any time and have their question answered first here in this series or this podcast, 710 Opinions. Aside from that, again, on Patreon, you do have the ability to use the RSS feed and listen to the audio only posts in your whatever podcast player you choose. All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I feel like it's time to start the show. We're back. For those of you that don't know me yet, I, of course, am a hash maker, cannabis processor, lab rat extraordinaire, and I have over 22 years of experience in making hash oil, isolate, crystalline, and of course, other derivatives of cannabis extraction. Really just about anything that I've heard about or had the equipment or access to the equipment or the ability to possibly make some sort of makeshift substitute for that, the necessary equipment. Been making it all for a long time. Right now, I of course am currently running a licensed cannabis processing lab here in Montana, and I am always looking for any opportunity to work with everyone and anyone, anywhere. So, if by chance you are in need of any sort of information more than you could get out of my Patreon, reach out to me and book a consultation, or let's get together and collaborate. Let's make some magic happen. All right, guys. In this episode, we're gonna, as we typically do, visit some common questions, but instead it's actually just gonna be one, a simple kind of common issue or common regularly asked, I guess, frequently asked, newcomer type question, right? And then I have a couple questions that have come in on Patreon that I actually, one or two on Patreon, and then another one that came in on YouTube that is just excellent. But anyway, luckily the patron content continues to come in. So this is the questions are just absolutely excellent, and that's what gives me the ability to do this. So hopefully some of you get a little something out of it, and if nothing else, if you asked, hopefully you get your answer. All right, guys. So let's get into it. All right. So we got a question about trends, cannabis-related stories or events, historical cannabis-related stories or events, and I can't really go very deep into that for you because I don't have a ton of information. But what I can tell you is that you should absolutely, if you're interested, find out or research William Randolph Hearst and how cannabis was originally demonized in the media and why it was demonized, and then of course what led to it becoming scheduled as a narcotic. And then I will touch on one other thing. Grow tips for beginners. Not only are there, there's an absolute plethora of literature out there that you can seek out, but there are now it's the age of, it's the digital age of social media, blah, 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 blah. So there are so many accounts that are just they're doing what I'm trying to do with extraction knowledge, but with cultivation information. So there's a guy here on YouTube called Canucks Grow. From what I've seen, it's pretty stellar, very informative work. Been around for a while, does really well. His channel is very successful, and it makes sense why. So we are going to move into our Patreon or patron questions. And we're going to start off in a little bit of a different order here. Kyle P. coming in with it. Kyle wanted to talk about some specifics about a CRC setup and how I assemble mine and why. And very simply, it has a cap with a gauge on the top, whatever. I think mine's a 12-inch spool, 4x12, and then I have 2 filter plates that I use. I want to say 5 micron filter paper. I'd have to double check, but either way, very, very fine filter paper. And then, pardon me. The underneath that filter paper on the filter plate is a screen also, which really gives the filter paper a lot of durability. But anyway, I do that twice above wherever I place my center disc. And if it's I have a Dutch weave one that comes with like the gasket that goes around the outside of it, and in that situation I just lay that literally lay the center disc in between the last fitting and the bottom of my CRC column, which I, rather than have mounted on the rack to go then through a line to the collection tank, I actually just mounted that on top of the collection tank. And there will definitely be a few little chunks here on YouTube, of course, from the closed loop content that I'll be publishing here over the next week or so. I think it's 3 videos, and in the 3 videos, it's a very from the very beginning to the very end of a closed loop hydrocarbon or butane extraction. I just have a little bit of work to do because there are parts in the center of the video where I'm gonna have to turn down the volume so much because of how loud the fan and pump are and stuff like that. And then I'm gonna have to subtitle it. So, but it's on its way. And of course, pieces of that again informative pieces, not like teaser or stupid shit, like actual posts will of course make its way here onto YouTube also. But the full-length content is for the patrons. So come on over, and again, check it out. Patreon.com/710extractions. So, Kyle, the reason I set it up like that is because those two filter papers, the first filter paper essentially acts as the seat or the bottom of the column, if you will. The remediation column, where the filtration media sits, and then I fill obviously the spool up with as much as I want to use, and then cap it. But that first filter paper is keeping the media, which is powders, up above. It's the bottom of it. The second filter paper is keeping, in case of any sort of failure or leak or whatever it is, keeping any filtration media or powder or anything like that off of the center disc, because the center disc needs to be kept clean to maintain a good flow. It's generally sub-micron or 1 to 5 micron, and it's so fine that you can't blow through it or anything like that. I have a Dutch weave, one that's stainless steel, and another one that's mounted within a filter plate, but they're so fine and what they do that as soon as if you let filtration media get onto the disc, you can have issues. And I imagine, honestly, eventually you definitely will have issues with it clogging, unless you regularly clean it, which of course just requires a warm ethanol soak. I steel wool a little bit on the side that sits up, and then I have a brush, you know what I mean, that's a steel wool brush, and I then ethanol soak, and then I let it sit in the oven over the weekend. Every time when I do this, I always do it on a Friday, and I turn the oven up to 150 and let these guys sit in there on a shelf over the course of the entire weekend, because I like to make sure they're completely dry. Everything that I make and everything that goes through those filters and goes through those discs, if you will, gets tested, and for all solvents and everything. So I have to make sure that there is no residual ethanol, because just the amount of residual ethanol that's in the lab from me cleaning makes it so that almost always a tiny little bit shows up in everything. So I have to mitigate that as best I can. So that is the setup that I prefer, because I try and take the best care of my disc as possible, keeping it as clean as possible so that I don't have to do that cleaning process as often as you would have to, I guess, otherwise. But I also every once in a while will take another filter plate with a filter paper and put that underneath where the center disc is, or even lay that Dutch weave center disc right on top of that filter plate. And the reason for that, of course, is so that when I'm done or I'm going to the next run and I'm disassembling and reassembling, I can check that and see if that filter paper is still is completely perfectly white again, knowing that oil went through it, and then enough solvent went through it after that it washed all the oil out of it, and now it's dry again. And there's no powder, anything, no hint of anything making it through. Then it's just a nice little reassurance. But again, that's completely psychological, because using the center disc and without any sign or obvious indication of a failure of your disc, there's no way any particulate is making it through that. So hopefully that helps. And let's see. Then I got another one from Stephen Butler, and his question was about how I got my own setup, what my lab situation is, partnership, ownership, etc. And then of course what it's like to do that in Montana, and he talks a little bit about what it's like to do it in Connecticut. So in Connecticut, there are many different types of licenses that you need depending on what you want to do in the cannabis industry, and also it's a new system, so it's limited and on a lottery basis. That's typical, and that's kind of sucks, but it makes sense. Here they are, the recreational system and third-party system is new, so like a year and a couple months new. So first off, the state placed a moratorium on anybody applying for licensing for a transport license, a MIP license, which is a cannabis processing facility, like a lab or a kitchen, and then a cultivation license, which is obviously a grow, or a storefront, a dispensary license. pardon me, and pardon the interruption there. The storage issues are prevalent. Anyway, as I was saying, the situation is similar here in Montana. In response to Steve's question, the licenses that you could or eventually will be able to apply for after the moratorium is lifted, and the original dispensaries that are right now the only ones that are allowed to operate dispensaries and are allowed to operate under their own licenses, and they are actually able to obtain and maintain their licenses. The state is not accepting applications yet, but when they do, you will be able to apply like for a manufacturing license, which is what I would do, and or a transport license, or just a cultivation, or maybe a plethora of all, or maybe just 6 storefronts, or whatever your thing is. But the fact is that as far as difficulty right now, it's impossible. And when it is opened up, money talks. It's very, very expensive. I think it's like a $10,000 application fee, and that's just like the first whack. Then putting a facility together that will pass building and fire inspection, and then eventually CCD, or Cannabis Control Division inspection, is a fortune. And so by the time you're up and running, you need to make money. But that's okay. That's definitely doable. It's just when the state here does allow, I of course will be getting in a line that I will be in with other people that have so much more money than I do, that they can afford things like lawyers and even representatives that will go to Helena, the capital here in Montana, and push and move and shake, and we'll see. So if and when that happens, wish me some luck. But I hope that kind of answers your question there, Steve. And for anybody thinking about what it's like to open up a cannabis facility or anything like that here in Montana, there you go. You can't yet. And when you do, like everywhere else, it's going to be expensive. No lottery system though, from what I understand, but that could very well change. So I think that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, let's call it. I appreciate you guys joining me for today's episode of 710 Opinions, and I hope you enjoyed it and maybe learned a little something. If you did, don't forget to come over and support me on patreon.com/710extractionist, and of course any and all other social media platforms, Instagram, here on YouTube. I don't know where else I am really, other than maybe Twitter and Reddit, and you can find me. I'm the same person everywhere I am, the 710 Extractionist. So, with that, I love you guys. I will see you next week, and stay lifted.